Would you please join me in prayer one more time, and then we will get into the word that we have for you today. Thank you. Let's pray. Jesus, I want to thank you for yet another opportunity that is outside of my earning, my capability, to be able to stand before your people and share with you things that you've whispered in my ear and do that. It's something that after doing it week after week after week, maybe I could get to take it for granted, and maybe there's a part of me that does that, but there's a bigger part of me that just feels like, who am I? Who am I to share? And I'm thanking you, God, for reminding me through what I'm going to talk about today that it's not about me and that it's about you. And you like to choose foolish things that don't make sense in order to have your name lifted high. And so I'm honored to be one of those foolish things. Thank you, God. May our ears and our hearts especially be open so that your Spirit can speak to us in whatever way you want to. And so if you have something to say to us, God, that can be through the words that I have, I want to pray that you would help that. And if you need to speak in spite of me today, God, I pray that you would do that. There's a word or two that I could say that maybe set off a chain and reaction in other people's minds and hearts and takes them where you want them to go. The point is, God, please, I'm asking you, I'm begging you to take us where you want us to go today. We need that miracle. We need you to show up and to lead us. So, Jesus, our attention is on you. May we see you as you are here. In your name we pray. Amen. It's easy today with the movies and other things that are out there to get superhero hype, to get excited about the idea of heroes. Marvel in particular has discovered that you can make a superhero movie about just about any ridiculous superhero and you'll make millions of dollars because we are just itching somehow to see heroes. And it starts at a young age. And for me, one of the places that it started was actually in the Bible. Thinking about some of these heroes, these amazing people who did incredible things. And you know, the Bible, especially the Old Testament stories, are not without characters that you could put a superhero label on. Characters with superhuman strength and superhuman abilities and tales of how they took care of all these enemies. You know, the collection of David's mighty men alone. There's so many heroes that you can look at. But even outside of those physical things, we can see all these different characters within the Bible that we look at as spiritual superheroes, as people who were incredibly faithful, who did these amazing things for God. And we tell these stories and we read them, and as children, we take them in. It's good to see these faithful people of God. The book of Hebrews, in chapter 11, the Hall of Faith, the famous people that it talks about from the Old Testament and how faith existed back then too. And it starts listing these people, these incredibly faithful people. And it goes through and it lists some of our favorites, and it's going through. And it's listing their good qualities and the things that they did that showed faith that they had in God. And I was reading through that, and this was a couple of years ago, but it was reading through Hebrews when I had recently read through the book of Judges, that I had one of those moments where I had to stop and ask myself, what is God trying to do here? Because this almost seems like a lie. This almost seems like it doesn't work. Because I read here in Hebrews chapter 11, after he's talked about Abraham and Moses and, you know, he spends verses, you know, the author of Hebrews talking about Abraham and Moses, but then he recognizes his sermon is getting long and he needs to wrap it up. So in verse 32 of Hebrews chapter 11, he says, "And what more shall I say? For time would fail me to tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, and all the prophets." And it goes on, and I'm sitting here, and as I listen to that, I think to myself, wait a minute, Samson? Now, I've heard talking to my mother-in-law that Samson was the subject of a sermon here recently, talking about, I believe we talked about this together too, last time I was here, about how Samson is a type or an image of Christ because he had this ridiculous love for somebody who was outside of Israel, and he would do anything for her, and she was right in his eyes. And it's a beautiful picture of Christ's love for us and for a fallen world. And so there's something you can see there as a type of Christ. But as I honestly read this story, it's hard for me to imagine that Samson was aware of that. that Samson got, oh yeah, I'm a figure of what the Messiah is going to look like in this way. No, if you read the story of Samson and go through, honestly, and read it through, it is really hard to find a lot of good things to say about him. It's really hard to compliment him too much. If this is what God had to deal with, if this is where he was as far as having a leader, was basically somebody who was a really, really, I'm trying to find, what are the good, safe, churchy words to use to describe Samson? He wasn't very smart. He was very full of himself. He had a problem with women and with anger and with all kinds of other things. And I read the story of Samson, and then I come and I see, but here he is listed in the Hall of Faith. And I found some consolation as to why that may be in here. But in order to get there, I want to examine the story of Samson. And asking really the question, what is the secret of being a superhero? Because of all people that you find in these Old Testament stories, Samson, Mr. Incredible himself, stands up as a very strong, no pun intended, case of what it means to be a superhero, what it looks like that. He literally had superhuman strength. Here's Samson. We find the story in Judges starting in chapter 13. We're going to go through little bits and pieces through chapter 16. That's where his story is found. And I want to encourage you to go there with me and follow along. And I'll let you know what verse I'm in, but we're going to be skipping. It's not all of it. I'm going to be reading less than a fourth of what's here. But here we start, Judges chapter 13. We're going to start in verse 2. Judges, pretty close to the beginning. I think it is the 7th book of the Old Testament. Are we there? Judges chapter 13? Already? I don't hear pages turning anymore, so let's go. Judges chapter 13. I'm going to start in verse 2. There was a man of Zorah, of the tribe of the Danites, whose name was Manoah. And his wife was barren and had no children. And the angel of the Lord appeared to the woman and said to her, Behold, you are barren and have not borne children, but you shall conceive and bear a son. Very much like the story of Mary or of Sarai or of Elizabeth. Or like this is a biblical theme, right? The woman who wants to have the children, who was Samuel's mother, right? There's another one of them there. The barren woman who has this great desire for a child. And so the angel appears to her and says, I'm going to give you a son. Therefore, verse 4, be careful. He's talking to her, by the way. This is talking to the mother. Be careful and drink no wine or strong drink and eat nothing unclean. For, or because, behold, you shall conceive and bear a son. No razor shall come upon his head, for the child shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb, and he shall begin to save Israel from the hand of the Philistines. Now, she was instructed a couple of things. What? Not to drink strong drink or eat the unclean animals, right? She was instructed to do these things because she was going to be his mother and she was going to pass these things down to him. So it was important for her to get in this position. So for Samson himself, what it looks like for the Nazirite vow is that the Nazirite vow is about not cutting his hair. But there's actually more to the Nazirite vow than just not cutting your hair. And Samson wasn't the only biblical character to have the Nazirite vow or to take that. It was actually something that anybody could take, a Nazirite vow, if they felt inclined to take this special vow. And the mother actually was given the instructions of part of the other parts of what it meant to take the Nazirite vow. We can find more about the Nazirite vow, and I just want to keep your finger in Judges chapter 13, but skip back to Numbers chapter 6, a couple books back. Numbers chapter 6 tells us about the Nazirite vow and gives us a little bit more detail about what it was like. Okay? Numbers chapter 6. And the Lord, verse 1, and the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the people of Israel, and say to them, When either a man or a woman makes a special vow, the vow of the Nazirite, to separate himself to the Lord, he shall separate himself from wine and strong drink. He shall drink no vinegar made from wine or strong drink, and drink no juice, any juice of grapes, or eat grapes, fresh or dried, no raisins for you. All the days of his separation he shall eat nothing that is produced by the grapevine, not even the seeds or the skins. I don't know who is going around just eating grape skins, but All the days of his vow of separation, no razor shall touch his head. That's the part of it that we think about with Samson, right? No razor shall touch his head until the time is completed for which he separates himself to the Lord. He shall be holy. He shall let the locks of his hair grow long. And then verse 6, keep with me here. Verse 6, all the days that he separates himself to the Lord, he shall not go near a dead body. If there's a funeral in town, don't go. If it's your own, the verse goes on to talk about it. If it's your own father, you're not going. Don't go near the dead body. This was a very serious vow. And as you go down, and if you were to read through and keep going through and about this vow, you would discover that it was such a serious thing that, say you had taken this Nazirite vow, there was some reason that you decided, you know what, I really need to just really commit myself to the Lord for the next 2 years. You can pick the time. You can say what it is. For the next 2 years, I'm going to take the Nazirite vow. I'm not going to eat anything to do with the grape. I'm not going to drink any strong drink, nothing with vinegar. I'm not going to touch the raisins. I'm not going to go near a dead body of any kind. I'm going to set myself aside. I'm not going to cut my hair. You've taken the full Nazirite vow. And then you find yourself walking along the road one day, and you look, and there in the ditch, there's some kind of a carcass, right? Oops. What you had to do is start over. It reset your clock. You were ticking down to, you made the vow. It was a vow that you made. You didn't have to do it. But you made this vow for a spiritual purpose. And so this happened, and you came across, and there was a corpse. Reset the timer. You just broke the vow. You got to start again. A parent dies. Well, you can go to the funeral. You'd be breaking your vow. And what would happen? You reset the timer. You go back and start the vow again. Back to Judges here. This is a little bit more full of a picture. And there are other people within the Bible story that probably, we think from kind of looking at it, had taken or were somehow connected to a Nazirite vow. John the Baptist being another example of somebody who was like that. But Samson was given a Nazirite vow before he was born, right? Who gave him the vow? God. The angel of the Lord came. This is your vow. He's not even, talk about no choice in the matter, right? This is what he is born into. And so Samson is given this vow. His mother passes it on to him. I can only imagine him as he's doing the math and sitting here thinking about it and putting it together. Okay, so I'm on this vow, and then he comes to his mom. Hey, by the way, how long? Like, I've been checking my watch here when I can shave, or when it's okay for me to, any of these other things. How long? And she says, oh, for life. Oh, okay. I don't know what happened in Samson's upbringing or how he processed or got with that. But the character of Samson that we find is not somebody who seems to be very spiritually connected with his vow. He's not somebody who seems to be, he's not like John the Baptist, who's like, I'm owning this. This is what God has called me to do. He seems to be a bit of a rebel. Now let's go on. So I told you we were going to read all of it. We read chapter 13, verses 2 through 5. Let's skip all the way down to verse 24. So we're in Judges 13:24. We get to the birth. There's a section in here where Manoah and his wife, they kind of they go back and forth and talk about the angel and what the vow is and kind of set it all up. But we actually get to the birth in verse 24. So here we are, Judges 13:24. And the woman bore a son and called his name Samson. And the young man grew, and the Lord blessed him. There's a verse that's like that for Jesus, if you didn't know, in the Gospels. And here's verse 25. Here's kind of one of those throwaway verses, one of those that it seems to be kind of setting the scene, and it doesn't really seem to have a lot of meat in it. I think it's one of the keys to this whole passage. Verse 25, and the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him in Mahanadan between Zorah and Eshtaol. The Spirit of the Lord began to stir him. The verse is telling us is that there came a point, and we don't know exactly how old he was, and I don't even know where this place is. If you were to show me a map of Israel, I'd have to have it labeled. I couldn't point it out. But there was a place for him that was significant, a time in his life that was significant, and significant enough that when the author wrote this down, they had, by the way, this is the point where the Spirit of the Lord began to stir in him. See, in the Old Testament, the Spirit of the Lord did not have the ability until Jesus was enthroned in heaven and took back control of this planet from Satan. The Spirit of the Lord did not have the ability to be poured out on all people everywhere at all times like the Spirit of the Lord can be now with us. But the Spirit of the Lord instead appeared to individuals at different times and came in them. And you can think of there's other stories of other characters like Saul, the king. The Spirit of the Lord came in him and he starts prophesying, and the Spirit of the Lord, and then there comes a time when the Spirit of the Lord departs from him and is with someone else now, right? David. And there's these other characters that the Spirit of the Lord comes with. And here's a moment for Samson the character when the Spirit of the Lord begins to stir in him in this place. Now, even though Samson may not have been a model citizen or the best leader or done everything right or seemed to be even really engaged with the task that God had given him to do, it's undeniable that he had a genuine encounter with God, at least in verse 25. The Spirit of the Lord got to him. There was a day. I don't know if he was attending a week of prayer somewhere or what he was doing, but there was a day when the Spirit of the Lord started stirring inside of him. And then the story goes on. And we're going to skip a little bit more. We're down in chapter 14. It tells one of the stories about, I think this is the passage here that Pastor Jan preached about, beginning of chapter 14. But then we get down, I want to skip down to verse 8. After some days, he returned from where he was pursuing one of the daughters of the Philistines. After some days, as chapter 14, verse 8, he returned to take her. And he turned aside on the road to see the carcass of a lion. Uh-oh. Right? Now, if you're just reading through Judges and you're just kind of going through and you haven't grounded yourself back in Numbers chapter 6 and knowing what the Nazirite vow was all about, you'd think, oh, whatever, there's a carcass, a lion. Okay, it's just part of the story. No, this is a big deal. This is a big deal for a Nazirite. He's walking along, and it's like the story of the Good Samaritan. You know, the priests are walking along, and there's the guy on the side of the road, and they step around. You would expect, this Nazirite comes across the carcass, and he sees it, and he's like, oh man, I better give myself a wide berth. What does he do instead? He sees the carcass of a lion, and behold, there was a swarm of bees in the body of the lion, and honey. He scraped it out into his hand and went on eating it as he went. Okay, how many Nazirite vows has he broken in the last 10 seconds? Right? There's a carcass. The buzzer goes off. He goes forward and puts his hand inside of it. Another buzzer goes off. And he starts eating honey that is contaminated. This wasn't the carcass of a goat. This is the carcass of a lion. It's an unclean animal. He's now broken 3 Nazirite vows in the space of 10 seconds. Right? If you're tracking with me here, I wonder if I'm spoiling this too much. I'm going to go ahead. If Samson's strength was connected to his Nazirite vow, i.e. his hair, he would have lost his strength well before Delilah cut it off. Right? Are you with me? As the child in me that heard the story of Samson in this moment is thinking, what? Wait a minute. I thought his hair was cut off and his vow was broken and he lost his strength because of it. But if his strength was actually tied into his hair and that's why he lost his strength, he'd already broken the vow 3 times in 10 seconds. He'd already done it. And I think, and this is me reading between the lines and just imagining maybe a little bit too much in the story, but as I read the story of Samson, I don't see a man who I imagine was perfect at keeping his Nazirite vow all the rest of the time either. Right? Well, he wasn't supposed to come near a carcass, dead animals, unclean things, right? Well, instead of a sword, he uses a donkey's jawbone. Right? There are other times I imagine this going on. Let's go on. You guys are with me. Let's jump ahead. Chapter 16. We're going to skip chapter 15. There's more stuff in there, but let's just get to the heart of it here because we're already there. enter the character of the woman Delilah, and then we have this exchange, and I could preach this. It's a funny story. It's sad. It's relatable. I don't know, for some of us. This story where this woman, it is humorous to me. Chapter 16, verse 4. After this, he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. And the lords of the Philistines came up to her and said to her, "Seduce him, and we will see where his great strength lies." What are they trying to figure out? They're trying to figure out the secret sauce of superheroes. They know he's Mr. Incredible. They know he's a superhero. Why don't you're close to him? He's got a real thing for you. Just seduce him and find out where his strength lies. Every Superman has to have a kryptonite. Figure it out for us. And then they go on. And by what means we may overpower him, that we may bind him and humble him, and we will each give you. I didn't even notice that until now, honestly. I didn't realize the word each was in there. I thought it was saying they were going to give her 1,100 pieces of silver. How many pieces of silver was Jesus sold for? 30. 30 pieces, 1,100 pieces. He was a problem, right? And I didn't even realize until now that the word each was in there. Each one of the lords of the Philistines was going to give her 1,100 pieces of silver. Each of them. Wow. So Delilah said to Samson, "Please tell me where your great strength lies and how you might be bound that one could subdue you." Who would listen to this? This is why it's humorous to me, right? You have to really, 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 really be, boy, again, trying to find the right words in church setting. Head over heels, kind of empty-headedly, right? You have to really be wrapped around a finger. You have to really, for her to come to him and say, "Samson, dear, please tell me something. How can we kill you?" Bats her eyes at him. "How can we do it? Please tell me." Samson said to her, he's quick, "If they bind me with 7 fresh bowstrings," I wonder if he had that planned ahead of time, that have not been dried, right? Where did this come from? He had to have planned this out ahead of time, right? 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried. It sounds like it's real because there's that extra detail in there about how it's not dried. "Then I shall become weak and be like any other man." And then the lords of the Philistines brought up, and they did exactly what it was, and she had him lay in ambush, and she did the thing to him, and then she shouts out, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." And he gets up, rah, and he's strength, and he's got all the strength, and pow, 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 right? And all the guys go flying out the windows, and he's standing there, oh, it's okay, right? He still had his strength. So the secret, to end verse 9, the secret of his superhuman strength was not known. Then Delilah said to Samson, boy, she's a class act, right? She's just tricked him and tried to tell him how to kill him. So, by the way, young men, if you're in a relationship like this, talk to the pastors and get some counseling and get out of that thing, right? Like, she asks, "How can I kill you?" And then she puts it into play, and he's like, it didn't work, you didn't kill me. And then she turns it on him, and she's now the victim here, right? "You're mocking me." She faints on the fainting couch, right? She makes him feel bad. "You've told me lies. Please tell me how we might kill you. Please." Delilah's. And he said to her, he's got another one. He probably ran out. Like he had a certain amount of these. Man, if someone asked me how to do this, I've got to have a couple backup lies here. But he ran out after a time. But he's got a second one ready. "Please tell me how you may be bound." He said to her, "If they bind me with new ropes that have not been used." He understands the way to make it sound believable is to add some kind of a detail, right? 4 ropes. They have to be from Home Depot. Right? Okay. "They've not been used. Then I shall become weak like any other man." So she does it again. She binds him up with and then the Lord of the Philistines comes. "Samson, wake up, the Philistines are upon you." Rah, pow, pow. They go flying out the windows. Oh, what's going on? I tried to kill you again. Delilah says to Samson, until now you've mocked me and told me lies. Tell me how you might be bound. And he said to her, number 3, we're in verse 13, if you weave the 7 locks of my head with the web and fasten it tight with the pin, then I shall become weak like any other man. See, she hadn't read Numbers, right? She didn't know. She made them tight. She did it. She shouts out, Philistines are upon you, Samson. He woke from his sleep, pulled the pin and the web and the loom all apart. Pat, pat, pow. And she said to him, how can you say you love me? All I've ever done is tried to kill you 3 times. But here's what she said. Okay, there is a detail. There's a verse. We're getting to the heart of this. Also, no pun intended. I didn't really, actually. She says, verse 15, how can you say I love you when your heart is not with me? Yeah, you're getting mad. I see some people getting upset, right? How can you say you love me when your heart is not with me? You have mocked me these 3 times. You've not told me where your great strength lies. And when she pressed him hard with her words day after day and urged him, his soul was vexed to death. And he went up into his attic and he wrote one of the Proverbs. It's better to live in the corner of an attic than with a contentious wife. He was pressed by her. This woman, what she did to him. God's mighty heroes. God's amazingly faithful people, huh? And here's verse 17. And I have, if you were to look in my Bible here, I have this underlined in a different color pen here, a little bit of green, because this is the passage right here that I think holds the secret to Samson's strength. Verse 17. And he told her all his heart. He told her all his heart. And said to her, a razor has never come upon my head, for I've been a Nazirite to God from my mother's womb. Was he correct? Was he right? He's right. Okay. If my head is shaved, then my strength will leave me, and I shall become weak and be like any other man. Was that right? Was there anywhere in the passage beforehand that said that? Was there anywhere in Numbers that said, oh yeah, and if you shave your head, then the magic leaves, right? No, you just start the time again. That's what happened in Numbers. Samson told her all his heart, which means that he believed what he told her. He believed it. He told her what he believed was the secret of his strength. The secret of my strength is that I took this special vow and I've got magic hair. And if the hair gets cut off, I'm going to lose my strength. That's what he believed because he told her all of his heart. He didn't hold back. And then what does she do? When Delilah saw that he told her all his heart, she sent and called the lords of the Philistines, saying, come up again, for he's told me the truth. He's told me all of his heart this time. Then the lords of the Philistines came up and brought money into her hand. She made him sleep on her knees, and she called a man and had him shave off the 7 locks of his head. Then she began to torment him, and his strength left him. Why did Samson's strength leave him? Why did Samson's strength leave him? Samson thought that his strength left him because his hair was cut off. I believe that Samson's strength left him because he thought his strength was in his hair. And when he confessed that with his heart, all of his heart, this is the secret of my strength. See, God was patient with Samson. God could deal with Samson. Samson had already broken his vow previously. God didn't pull back his spirit. He didn't pull back the gift. There's a lot God can deal with in our foibles and in our failures. But when we get to the place where in our hearts, it is not God who is giving us our strength, but we ascribe it to something else, what can God do but step back and say, well, if that's what you want, that's what you got. Samson, if you think your strength is in your hair, then by all means, you have the strength that was in your hair. It's yours. There you go. And he was left with what he thought he had. Samson's strength was not in his hair. Samson's strength was in the Spirit of the Lord that came on him well after his hair had grown for a long time. Samson's strength was in the Lord, but he ascribed it to something else. And if this isn't clear in the passage, let's go on and finish the story. Because what happens in this tale, this narrative that Judges is weaving for us, is an incredible reversal that highlights the actual story and what's going on. Because what happens after that? The lords of the Philistines, verse 23, gathered to offer a great sacrifice to the fish god. Remember Dagon, the fish god, the one who falls over on his face in the presence of the ark when the Philistines take him? The fish. And they make this sacrifice to Dagon, their god, and to rejoice. And they said, now what are they doing here? They're revealing all of their heart. The Philistines said, our god, the fish, has given Samson, our enemy, into our hands. And when the people saw him, that is Samson, they praised Dagon. For they said, Dagon has given our enemy into our hands, the ravager of our country who's killed so many. And when their hearts were merry, they said, come, call Samson that he may entertain us. The story has immediately reversed and pivoted, and whereas Samson had this issue where he was ascribing his strength and his power to his hair, now the story goes immediately, boom, to the Philistines who take the same thing. They're trying to figure out what the kryptonite was, and they figured it out. They knew it wasn't in the hair. They knew that wasn't it. It wasn't in the hair. It was the fish god. Dagon did it. So you can imagine God sitting up there, and as he pulls back from Samson, all right, if that's what you want. And then immediately that starts happening, and he's like, are you kidding me? No, it wasn't Dagon either. But just as he gave Samson what he wanted, he's going to give the Philistines what they wanted too. Okay, if it's Dagon who's protecting you and helping you out, then you'll have all the help that Dagon is going to give you. So they called Samson, they brought him out. Talks about there's 300 men and women and looking on, and Samson is being mocked and entertained. And then verse 28, this is it. This is the end of it here. Samson called to the Lord and said, O Lord God, please remember me, and please grow my hair back out so that I can do the thing again. Right? No. Because Samson, for all his faults and foibles and all the absolute waste of superhero power that he was given, Samson finally got it. And he recognized it. And he said to God, you please strengthen me. Only this once, O God, that I may be avenged on the Philistines. God gives Samson what he asks for. Now, here we were in Hebrews chapter 11. All these faithful people, right? Like Abraham, who lied about his wife's sister. And like Moses, who killed somebody trying to start a revolution. It goes on and on, right? David is listed in here, isn't he? We don't need to go down that trail. The man after God's own heart who took the wife of one of his best friends and had him killed to cover it up. And he was. Uriah was one of David's mighty men, one of his closest friends. He wasn't just some random soldier. But here we have it, verse 32 again. What more shall I say? For time would fail me to tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, and the prophets. And then it starts to go on because he doesn't have the time. He's not going to go on. He's not going to tell the entire story and connect all the dots. But he says something here. Verse 33, he starting to say, well, there's all these different heroes. And then he starts to describe some of the qualities of these heroes who, through faith, conquered kingdoms, enforced justice, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions. We know who that one was, right? Quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword. And then I believe in here is the qualifying remark for Samson and why he is in the book of Hebrews. We're made strong out of weakness. We're made strong out of weakness. Samson wasn't a strong dude because of his hair. Samson was not a superhero in and of himself or because of magic hair. Samson was made strong because the Spirit of the Lord came into him. And it was made strong in his weakness. And this is always the key to superhuman strength in the kingdom of God. His strength is made perfect in our weakness. It is not the vows that we have kept. It is not the Nazirite way of living. It is not the hair. It is not these things that we want to look at that make and give us our strength. These things are rich in purpose and meaning in and only in their proper sphere, which is an understanding that it is God who gives the strength. It is God who saves. It is God who does it. We are worshiping today on the Sabbath, the day that should remind us every week of this exact principle, that we are invited into a rest, in a finished work to which we did not contribute, to which God did not ask our advice when he did it. And it's done in his creative power and his salvation power. We rest in that, and it is in that resting and acknowledging and asking for the presence of his Spirit in our lives, which is free to us all, as it is to Samson or was to Samson. His Spirit has been poured out in all of the earth. And in asking for the power and the presence of God himself to be with us, we also can find the secret of superhuman strength. Will you pray with me? Jesus, thank you for this time we could spend together, and I just want to pray a blessing again on these people, that you would bless us with a heart that desires your presence and desires your strength, that we would be able to, each of us, in whatever ways it happens, that our hearts have gotten tricked, that we've wrapped our minds and our hearts around believing that it's something else besides you, that you would begin to untangle those nets and those knots that have made us so corrupted in that, and free us, God. I pray that you would free these people and myself from the lies and from anything that keeps us from recognizing that it is you and you alone who give us our strength, who saves us, and who will create in us clean hearts that desire to do what you want us to do. Thank you, God. Please bless us throughout the rest of this, your day. Be with us, God, and bring us to new and higher places with you because of your goodness and because of your glory.